The sponsor of today's interview is College Soccer's Next. College Soccer's Next is the #1 college soccer recruiting service focused on helping aspiring prospective student athletes achieve their dreams of playing college soccer. Some of the services that they're able to provide, I got to read them off the list, include a college soccer mentor who's gone through the recruiting process firsthand, a strength and conditioning coach, a sports nutrition coach, a professional highlight video editor, as well as a personal evaluation and strategic proven plan of action, as well as much, much more to make your dreams of playing college soccer turn into a reality. Book your free consultation call today down in the description at collegesoccersnext.com. Take your first steps at earning your college soccer scholarship today. Enjoy the episode, folks. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Kick a Ball podcast. I'm your host for today, Danny Lang, and today we have a very special guest, the head coach of Loudoun United and USL Championship, Coach Ryan Martin. How are you today, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on here. So appreciate it and enjoyed following your work.
Of course, I really appreciate you wanting to come on. I mean, it's always I always just send out a message just to see, hey, if you've got any time, I'd love to bring you on for an interview. But it's always a nice treat for us to be able to organize something like this. And I'll always be really appreciative of you, Coach.
Yeah, anytime you can talk about the game with people that love it, and it's there's always time for that.
Thank you. So just looking at the Loudoun offseason so far, I mean, we've seen a lot of just the press releases of the returners for 2025, the new signings of one of my guys that I really like watching, Wesley Leggett and Jacob Erlotson. Would you mind I know we've seen the releases and the quotes just about some of these guys, but how valuable they've been in 2024 and to know that they're coming back in this upcoming season. Would you mind just saying a few things about some of those guys and then some of the other returning players that we're going to really be seeing as stars for this upcoming year?
Yeah, we're quite excited. We're bringing back 16 players, and what we did last year or this year in 2024 is we really went from being a true, second team in 2023 to a team that has higher ambitions and guys that still want to make professional levels, get to Europe, etc. But it's a little bit older players and guys that are more ready to win right now and compete in a very difficult USL championship.
Right.
So when we went out and we started re-signing, these 16 players, we wanted to start with, okay, our goalkeeper was one of the best in the league last year, our Hugo Farrow, especially towards the end of the year. And we wanted to continue to build on his ability to play out of the back, his ability to help us dictate the game, to have the ball, to make sure that we're able to, break through opposition presses. And, Dane Jackman, who played at Penn, joined us as well. He's back again. And he's another one that did a great job. He had an Open Cup run, so we felt like it was, potential wise, he's got tremendous potential. He's a young goalkeeper who's finding his way and, took great strides. And then, our back line, for the most part is back with, as you mentioned, Jake Erlanson and Giannis Learman and Kwame Oahu and Keegan Tingy are all guys that, played significant minutes for us, but with a caveat that they played a different role than they did in previous seasons. Kwame, for example, missed all of 2023 with an Achilles injury. So the question mark was, how would he respond coming back from an Achilles? And, Jake was in and out of a second team environment with Columbus, and it's a different ask of, what we're asking here than there. There's the priority is developing players and getting to the first team. Ours is asking him to win and transition to be a leader, and which he did a tremendous job. Giannis Learman had a hernia issue in 2023, missed significant time, and Keegan Tingy was in the same boat as Jake. So when we saw what they could become last year, and they showed glimpses of it, it only made sense to double down and go again and see if they can have the same amount of growth from one year to the next. And we're bringing back both starting center midfielders and Tommy McCabe and Drew Skundrich, who, when healthy, Drew only played about 60% of the minutes, but when he was healthy was, probably our most reliable player. And, then we had, Florian Velo, who's a top attacker and a 31-year-old who's coming back. And, Abdelatif Abukoro is an interesting, very talented young player that we're excited to see what he becomes. And, you sandwich that with, some very, very good attackers. Like you said, Wesley Leggett, and, took a tremendous jump this year. And We're betting on him to make another jump, and Zach Ryan, who's been double-digit goal scorers in back-to-back years, and Riley Bidwell, and it's a great base, and we brought them back because of where they fit culturally, where they grew from 2020, the beginning of 24 till now, but most importantly, where we think they can go individually and collectively.
Right. And that ends up just being, I think you encapsulate it perfectly. And of course, I mean, you're in there every day with these guys and just working through, these practice sessions. It's a little bit different than, the college environment and, I bring that up just because that's where a lot of our audience is, as I talked to you a little bit about. But I mean, I think what is just a perfect storm, I think, with this team is, as you've talked about, you have these older veterans who are still looking to make these strides each season, really each month, every week, leading into each match day. But how valuable is that bringing 16 guys back, which is so it's a great number in terms of you do have an understanding of what you're getting, but you still have this opportunity to look at other talent moving forward. And I'm sure that's also a big part of at least this time right now. In looking at new guys who are coming into this organization, what are some of the things that you look at for them, not necessarily on a tactics base, but just as, personal players? Who are the kind of guys that you see fitting at Loudoun?
Yeah, so one of the big things we did, and the reason the big commonality all 16 have in particular are non-tactical related, really, reasons. One is their character and who they are as a person, speaks very loud, loudly of what they've done, what they've overcome. They've all had different moments of resiliency or setbacks that they've had to overcome, and I think a lot of it, you mentioned the college pathway. I think it's so important. I think of this group, 90% played in college somewhere and across the country. And, I've always found that, I worked at Wake Forest University for 9 years as a coach there, and always felt that the college game, and still do feel that the college game is a tremendous resource and a tremendous springboard for players to become professionals. I think it's guys that are maybe late bloomers or guys that are maybe just not ready for it, or guys that are just super academically motivated and they want to become a well-rounded person and individual, which goes into a lot of top players that we've seen in going overseas or going professional in our top league. I think the other thing that was really important for us and what we look for in players is having a growth mindset and the ability to want to get better. We ask a lot of players to do reflection on their games, their training sessions, and we have conversations around them and whether they meet the standards or whether they don't. But if you don't truly love the day to day, looking at video, reflecting, thinking about how you can become better, then you're not a really good fit for what this project is, because it is demanding of guys that are not just talented, but guys that maybe are less talented, but want to work that much harder to get to where they want to go. And when you're at this level, we want guys that want to get better and want to continue to improve. So I think between the character, the resiliency, and then you look at the growth mindset, those are key traits that we look for in players we're bringing in here.
Right. That's interesting that you talk about that though too, because there's always the old saying that mentions, um, hard. I want to make sure I get it right. Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Is that something that you've seen, especially now, during your career? Because sometimes it's just hard to evaluate on the outside perspective when, I'm really looking at the media. All I really am able to do is just have these conversations. I could hear it, but I don't necessarily see it every day. Is that something that you've seen at least in your career?
Yeah, I think the higher you get, I think the higher you get, the less that talent can separate people. I think the higher you get, the more intrinsic motivation really affects your ability to earn a spot or earn another contract or earn playing time. I think when you're younger and in club soccer or high school soccer or even college soccer, you can do minimal if you're just very talented. And I think that's when you get closer and closer in the window and the talent gap shrinks. It's everything else that really adds up to what you become in your journey. And that's the question we always ask the guys is, okay, here's where you are, here's where you want to be. How do you shrink the gap in between the two? And for us, that's a really important moment for them. It's like, okay, well, how do we shrink it together?
So now, do you think there's any way that really could apply to coaching? I feel like sometimes, or no, not is there any way? What is the way that you think that applies to coaching? Sometimes we see it on the player's perspective a lot, but how do you continue to get better every day and continue to be motivated to, aside from, having the duty to the club, the duty to yourself, how do you make sure that you're continuing to be better every day?
I think when you look in the mirror and you ask yourself, what I am as a coach today, compared to 4 months ago or 4 years ago, if
Mhm.
I haven't progressed in the way I think about people, leadership, the game, then I haven't done something correct. And I think that comes in the form of reading books. It comes in the form of I just completed my US Soccer Pro license. So that's another method of growth. I think when you're looking at this next year, I've already signed up for, I'm taking a leadership course at Harvard and online. I'm taking a leadership course with, a professional rugby team across the world. So I think when you're looking at, how do you continue to get better and evolve? You go meet people. I recently had, an opportunity to talk with a Major League Baseball, manager and how he sees in his environment, how he sees relievers, because for me that's similar to what a substitute is being asked to do. So how can I translate what he uses in baseball into soccer to try to become better and think differently about the game, and more importantly about myself? And I think it's almost more important the higher you go, the less it is about really the X's and the O's, and it becomes about leadership and who people are, and how to get the best out of people. But in order to do that, you've got to understand who you are first, and how you can become better. And I can't ask my players to become um growth mindset and better players if I don't do the same myself. I stand at the front of the room most days, and I'm the role model. So if I don't do it, um, you can't really ask players to do it if I can't do it myself.
Fascinating. I think that's a fantastic insight on just the kind of on the way that your mind works. I think, as much as I'm sure what goes up there. Yeah, and again, I want to not go so far into like the tactical aspect of it and everything else because I don't want to try to draw anything out of you that maybe for whatever reason could be used. But I think that's a great insight just on what this locker room really looks like behind the four walls that, people like me that not involved in playing style at all. I mean, I really appreciate the insight just on that.
Yeah, and this has been a fun locker room, which is another reason we brought back 16 of them, because it was the best, closest locker room that we've had, and like-minded people. And so for us, I've also found in my journey that one bad apple or one rotten apple can really ruin a lot. And so for us, picking people was so important. And that's why we're excited about what we have for 2025.
Right. So, I again, I appreciate the time that we've been able to talk just about the present right now, but I want to be able to go back into your past for a minute. If you wouldn't mind, I would love to hear every part of your journey that has brought you really to first taking becoming the second ever Loudoun United head coach. Really your first memories in football. I know I especially want to hear the story about playing college soccer under your dad, Mr. J. Martin. But anything and everything that you're willing to share here, I'm more than willing to hear it. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, for sure. So I obviously was fortunate to grow up in a household for a coach's son, and my father was the at the time, and just retired, but he was the head lacrosse coach and soccer coach at Ohio Wesleyan University, and he was there for 48 years, and just retired as the all-time winningest coach in college soccer history. And so that's for me was my intro to soccer, my intro to coaching, my intro to becoming a growth mindset type person, my mindset into what I really wanted to do down the road. And so playing for him was a tremendous experience, and it was hard because he was harder on me than he probably was on other people, and I couldn't understand it at the time. Why he was like that. But then when you reflect, and they always say hindsight's 2020, and it's easier to look back, but you can see why he was maybe harder on me than others. And I've understood, he did a really good job. When I look back at how he shaped my coaching in particular, was he was on the forefront of really the mental side of preparation in terms of individual and collective preparation, whether that was, setting values as a team, or whether that was individual and team goal setting, or whether that was visualization, or whether that was individual small size goals of how do you get better today, and then how do you quantify it. His ability to speak to young men and help them become better versions of themselves on and off the field, were really a lot that I took away from him, and the way he did it. And he'll admit this. He isn't, or wasn't, the best tactical coach in the country, and never really was, but it really made me understand the importance of humans and the connection with human beings, which was something I'll always take with me, in my journey. After I played at Ohio West, and we, went to a Final Four. We, I think won a lot of games. I think lost 7 in my 4 years there, and had some success. I went to Real Salt Lake. I played there kind of as a training player slash, reserve games, and had a great opportunity with John Ellinger, who gave me a great opportunity to kind of get the ins and outs of what professional soccer is. And I knew when I arrived there that I wasn't going to make the national team or be a top MLS player. So my goal for the year was to gain as much information as I could about professional soccer and about what top teams are doing, and the difference between a college season, which is 4 months, and the professional game, which is 10 months. And when I reflect of, okay, how does your body feel, and how do you maximize breaks, and how do you, and then we had an interesting team where we had a lot of older players at the end of their careers, like an Eddie Pope and a Jeff Cunningham and Jason Christ and Kerry Tallies, and some good older players. And then we had a lot of good younger players as well, Mehdi Belushi's, and it was an interesting mix because some guys could be pushed more, some guys needed more days off, and the management side of that was interesting. I ended up, after my year in Salt Lake, I ended up tearing my ACL, and I ended up taking a volunteer college coaching position at Wake Forest University in North Carolina. I started there in 2007, and essentially, we won the national championship that year, and it was obviously a good start. Had a number of really good players, and I worked for Jay Vidovich at the time, and now at that point, now the head coach of St. Thomas in Minnesota was there as well with me, and so we ended up going to 4 Final Fours, I think, in 9 years, and we went through an interesting journey of, Jack Harrison was there, to, John Baccaro, Ian Harks, to Sam Cronin's, a number of guys that went on to professional careers, 3 Mac Herman Trophy winners, so we were pretty fortunate with that, and with Jay at Wake Forest, I was able to basically progress from a volunteer coach all the way up to the top assistant coach and recruiting coordinator. And like I said, when I left in 2015, we ended up having a team with Jack, 2 Herman Trophy winners, and then Jack Harrison. So it was a pretty good way we left the program. But he, tactically on the field, and the way he trains the players to this day, is still probably one of the best I've seen in all of my travels and working for different people. He, on the grass, he's one of the best, and tactically, incredibly sharp. And he's a guy that, another guy I take more probably in my game model than I do from really my dad, and more of the leadership and management part. So I enjoyed that. 2015, he ended up taking a job with the Portland Timbers, and then I ended up going to the Columbus Crew with Greg Berhalter, where I spent 3 months basically running their college prep program and looking at their homegrown players. And working for Greg was another education in itself, in the way how detail oriented he was, how his game model and his system I quite liked, and was able to learn quite a bit. The way he was able to take a team to the MLS Cup final that year was incredible to see how he put the group together. And then how he managed the staff. I think in the staff, it was, everybody, Josh Wolf to Nico Estevez to Pat Onstad. It was a really remarkable staff. And then after about 3 months John Harkes, who played the national team level, he called and he said we're starting a pro team in Cincinnati, Ohio, which is now called FC Cincinnati. But at that point, nobody heard anything about it. So we took a chance and we went down to Cincinnati and we started a team from scratch, and we went on to finish third in the league in our first year. And we went from nobody knowing what we were doing to having 32,000 people and playing a friendly against Crystal Palace, and pretty remarkable. And what we did was we put the team together from scratch, put the staff together from scratch, put everything together. And what we did heavily was rely on people with previous connections, or guys that had a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, and or guys that we could understand their character from. And the way we did it was a lot of college guys with college histories. We had, Andrew Wiedemann, who played at Cal, and we had 3 or 4 Wake Forest guys, and Corbin Bowe and Shauna Coley. And, I was able to bring in, Mitch Hildebrandt, who was a goalkeeper that played with, my dad's former player. So we did a deep dive into players through the college system in a lot of ways, and it paid dividends. And it was guys that were hungry for success. And after the year, 3 of them went to the MLS. One went over to Australia, and numerous guys have gone on to have success. After that season, I went to DC United as the academy director in the January of 2017, and basically came in here, and my goal was to increase the talent pool of the club and help guys get to the first team. And so it was a different challenge, and I was coaching the U17s and the U19s at the club at the time. And then we were able to, bring in guys like, Griffin Yao and Kevin Paredes, who recently played for the U.S. in the Olympics. And we had, Moses Nyman, who's gone on. We've had numerous guys, Adam Lundegaard, who won the national championship at Clemson last year. Justin Meller is playing up at Cornell, obviously. And we've got a number of guys that have come through the academy that have gone on to play professionally. Ted Cudi Pietro, Jackson Hopkins. And so I really enjoyed it, but I always wanted to get back into professional soccer. That was always my goal. So when Loudoun opened, when Richie Williams left to go to Bruce Arena in 2019, I just finished my UEFA B at the time. And I got a call in Ireland when I was doing it over there, and they asked if I wanted to take over. And essentially it was really what I wanted to do. It was helping the elite of the elite in the academy get to the first team and bridge the gap and use it in the USL level. And at that point, there was still a number of other second teams in the USL, and there wasn't the MLS Next Pro. So there were some teams that were, younger and going, competing, etc. And then recently, we were one of the only ones left in terms of younger teams competing in the USL. And it's a very difficult league because most of the teams have MLS experience, or older players, or guys with families,
Sure.
and this is their living. And we're pushing, a 15-year-old Moses Nyman to become a professional. And it's difficult because you have to teach him how to become a pro, where he might be more talented than anybody he plays against. The inconsistency and the how do you help him get to where he wants to go, while winning and losing, is always a difficult part. And that brings me to today, which is, we're a little bit more standalone with still an emphasis on player development, whether that's an older player who wants to get better, or whether that's a younger player like a Gavin Turner who wants to, be the next pro. These are different pathways. So that is a long-winded answer of my journey.
But you know what though? I won't lie to you. I was gonna have a few questions as I was going through, but I won't. Sometimes when I'm listening to these kinds of stories, I forget what in the world I'm gonna say. I try to. It's such a privilege to just be able to sit here on the Zoom call and have it just firsthand before it actually releases. But that being said, I really appreciated hearing the entire thing of that. And a lot of great insights along the way though too. One thing I'll bring up too, actually, a quick note. Justin Melly goes up to Cornell. I pretty much watched every home game that that kid has played. I go up there right now, and he's phenomenal. Not only as a player, but as a great person, as a great friend that I've
Oh
been
yeah.
able to be able to have. So, um, but again, too, something that I think has been a consistent theme, at least with you before taking on this head coaching role now with these professionals, has just been being able to fine tune academy and younger guys looking to make that roll up. Is there something that you would recommend to some of the other younger coaches who maybe are first getting into this style of system now? Maybe they were coaching professionals or whatever it ends up being, or whatever career path that they had taken up to that point, what's something that you think is should be most stressed in coaching youth and academy guys into saying, okay, well, they're not professionals yet, and they may not have the mindset of a pro yet, but how do you go about getting them to that point?
Yeah, I think I always looked at it as almost a roadmap to becoming a pro. And you have to teach them what they don't know to bridge the gap. And that goes everything from you've got to teach them nutrition, hydration, how to take care of their body, post game, pre training, post training routines. The importance of routines, the importance of mindset, goal setting. These are things that a lot of kids take for granted because they are so talented. They rely on their talent and they get by with it. But if you can help ingrain these with younger players earlier, it just helps so much. The importance of and this is where I think college soccer serves a huge value in our infrastructure or our soccer society, if you will, is you can't replicate the pressure that people feel in an NCAA tournament game. You can't replicate, like in my history at Wake Forest, you can't replicate going to University of Maryland College Park and playing in front of 5,000 people yelling at you in a nationally televised game. You can't replicate that with a MLS Next Pro game in terms of competitiveness and what it means and how difficult it is. And so that's where when I was a USL coach, even academy coach, it was like, no, this is development. But if you don't win, then and you want to become a pro, someone's going to lose their job. You're going to lose your spot. And you're going to have to win a spot. Nobody's going to give it to you. And these are things that you can't take for granted. And yes, there's a development part of it, but part of the development is understanding the consequences of winning and losing. And I think that's something that younger players need to understand, and it's got to come through teaching. And I think that's where, when you have a young talent, a lot of people don't want to teach or critique or give information because they're so talented and don't want to ruffle their feathers. But I think it's important sometimes that you do, because you want to help them get to where they want to go. And it's the same thing I talked about at the beginning, is here's where they are now, here's where they want to go, and we got to close the gap. And sometimes you've got to tell them what they need to hear and not what they want to hear. And there's a big difference of that, because if I just told them what they wanted to hear all the time, they'd never become any good. And it's like, well, you want to become a pro. You want to, so when I say this to you, it's because you want to be it. Like, if you don't want to be a pro, then don't ask for this type of pressure or feedback or evaluation or me to challenge you, because that's the reality of it. So I think teach, help players become where they want to go. Let them guide themselves. I've always found players with ownership and a desire, help their own way. I love when coaches always say, I develop this player, I develop that player. The reality is, I think coach or players develop themselves. I think I've seen many players that either have a mindset or don't have a mindset. I've seen really talented players never make it, and they've done the same thing. I've done the same thing with them, of guys who are not as talented that made it as pros or made it to college. And it's so important to really understand that premise. It's like ownership of what they're doing is so important in their growth. And that's where I find, again, college soccer is an interesting one, because you have to have so much ownership, because you are so limited in spring, you're so limited in the summer. So my question is always, okay, well, what are you doing, or what are they doing throughout the spring and summer to become better and to make up the gap of, or maybe someone else has a opportunity.
And that's ultimately the kind of question that ends up separating, I mean, exactly like you're talking about, people who, um, what are you doing with your time outside of these 4 hours a day, or however much of a time it really is in college, where, maybe you have two very, very talented players, but one of them is using their time that much better. That's what's going to end up paying dividends and end up making them a better pro. Like pretty much exactly like you talked about.
100%. And then you throw social media in there, and parents and agents, and the amount of people in these top kids circle are a lot. And to have help them navigate that is not always easy, but you have to at least continue to try. And the ones that focus on their growth and the process really become the top players.
Right. And so now what does this ultimately look like in translating and figuring out in roster building and figuring out the kinds of people that you want to bring into FC Cincinnati? I mean, that's been a huge project that has now become I one of the premier destinations, I think, or final destinations for guys who want to make it in MLS. FC Cincinnati surely is at the top of the list, and a huge part of that has just been, what has been built over really roughly the last decade of that team. But when you go about building a team like that from scratch, zero players, and trying to figure out who is going to be the best fit for an organization that you don't necessarily know what the fit looks like. What were some of the first steps that you took to go about doing that? Who were the first conversations like, and ultimately getting to number three in the conference in the Eastern Conference, a very high performing team. What were some of the trials that maybe you discovered during the season? I really want to hear what 2016 Cincinnati was like, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, when John and I set the whole thing up, the first one was really sitting down and trying to figure out with John, what type of person do we want and what type of player. And John is really likes, and I do too as well, but like blue collar, hardworking guys that love to get better and love the game. And those were important and wanted to be part of the community of Cincinnati and give back to what they were doing. And so when we set out for trying to recruit on a blank vision where we're trying to say, hey, this is what we're doing, this is where we're going. We didn't have a stadium, we didn't have training ground, didn't have colors, didn't have jerseys, but we're trying to bring people in, and this is what we're doing. You're sharing them on something, being part of something bigger than themselves, and wanting to be part of a collective group that is going into the unknown to achieve a goal. And so when we built it, that was identifying the players was the first step. And then it became having conversations with the players themselves and what are their goals, what are their expectations, explaining the project, seeing if their values match up to ours, seeing if they really love the game. Then it became doing background homework, which normally revolved around speaking to former coaches, whether that's college coaches or whether I've worked with them in the past. Like at that point, I had worked with six at some point in the past and recruited probably 10 to 12 of them in their parts as well. And then we wanted to look for people that have won and succeeded, and more importantly, guys that didn't win and succeed and then overcame it to find a way to succeed. So guys that went through failure, some part of their journey, and maybe it was getting cut from an MLS team to go to Ottawa at the time and then win a championship at Ottawa. Like that. Okay, that's a big moment. How did you step up from that? Or have like Eric Stevenson, who went to Akron. He'd had a really bad injury at Red Bull, almost wasn't going to play again, and it was a sign of resiliency to come back and become bigger than that. And so for us, that those were like the key components. And then the last one was the easy one, was do you really love the game? And you can see that when players are playing, and that was fun. They enjoyed it. They enjoyed playing with each other, and the journey together was magnificent, and wouldn't trade it for the world. It was something I'll have with me for the rest of my life.
I mean, that's such a unique experience. That's such a few, really only a handful of people ever really get to see this creation, this formation of top players in a top league in the US, and then ultimately being able to see its fruition and the fruits of your labor and seeing that. I mean, that has to be an amazing feeling. Again, like you were talking about.
Oh yeah, it was great. And then the way the fans and community came behind it, and then what it's become today is truly special, and it's been fun to see and know that you were part of building that from the beginning, and a bricklayer for really what it's become today.
And so, what do you think you've been able to learn, at least through these trials and experiences? I mean, maybe you didn't see them in your time. And actually, I'll ask a few things about Wake Forest too, but I want to ask this first. Just, what were some of the things in coaching that maybe you realized or you thought you had figured out, at least with Wake, and then being able to have this coaching experience and this academy technical side that you've been able to figure out, at least over the last few years?
Yeah, I think when I started out really young at Wake Forest, I thought in my mind that tactics were going to solve problems, and it's so great to X's and O's. And if you know what you're doing in training, you're going to be an elite coach in the country or world. Like that's where you got to put your time and effort. The longer I've gone in the journey, the more I've realized that it's about the people in the journey, and it's about helping them become better, and then it's about connecting the individual people you have into something bigger. And so I've really tried to invest a lot of my time in people. And I think if you ask, most of the people that I've coached, there's always going to be people that, don't like you for one reason or another. But I think the majority of them I have very good relationships to this day. And I still get texts and calls and emails and updates on, family. And, that means a lot shows you've had an impact on their life, not just on them as a player. And I think a lot of coaches have impact on players, all the time. But I think the truly special ones, when you look at history of coaching, from John Wooden's to, anyone you want to go into, they've had an impact on people's lives as well. And so that's something I've always tried to take with me. And I also think if you give more to the players, they'll give 10 times more back to you. And if you, and so that's where, if you can get into a player in terms of who they are, how they operate, and you're genuine and authentic with them, you'll get even more back, which again helps the performance, because they want to play for you, they want to be a part of something special, and they want to be connected to you. So I think that's been the biggest lesson in my journey. um it is about the people, and it's so important, and you just got to surround yourself with good people, and the more you do that, the more success you'll have.
So much of just the relationship in coaching is the soft, intangible stuff that we never really get to see on the pitch, and it really is just behind the closed doors. Um, it when you go about being able to build, there's already a relationship that's built when you bring someone into an organization. Right as soon as they sign that first contract, there's endless conversations, again, like you were talking about, that I've been able to learn, that the people listening have been able to learn about their character, the way they play the game, and being able to recover from failures. So from that, having so much information about these guys already and continuing to find other ways to be able to connect. Sometimes it's in as long of a season as it is in this 10 month, as opposed to, let's say you have that college guy who it's the 4 months and then it's the blip in terms of just the spring and the summer staying in shape. Over a 10-month season, there are going to be highs and lows, and that's just one season on its own. I can't imagine what this looks like, 4 or 5 years of a player's career staying in a particular place. But how do you continue to connect with new guys, returning players in different ways moving forward?
Yeah, I think when you connect with people, it's normally around shared experiences, and I think the older I get, the more experiences I have in life, and dealing with people. So you tend to share more experiences that people have, because you've been through similar stuff, whether that's a death in the family, or a breakup, or going to college, or graduating from grad school, or doing these different things. I've seen a lot more than I did when I was 22, so I'm able to connect a lot more with different people there. So I think the shared experiences, help quite a bit. And then I think sometimes I think I found it sometimes it's easier to not really even have an agenda when you speak to someone, because you don't always know the true depths of who they are or what they're going through. So it's important to open the door and say, hey, how are you? I mean, I think that's an easy way to do it. How are you really doing? And in a 10-month season, and what I've learned in the professional versus the college game, in the college game, you typically as a coach aren't dealing with marriages and births and deaths, and
Mm.
because as the older players get, obviously the more life hits them, the more situations hit them, and I think it's harder to it's easier to connect, but it's some harder situations that you sometimes deal with. Divorce,
Mm.
these are real things that people go through at the professional level, that you try to help them get through, or it's a never ending list, but those are kind of the best ways I've found.
And another thing on that note, though, too, I mean, looking at, let's just think, I'm hoping that you don't hear the train that's going by over here. I'm worried that it might have got picked up, but um, my backyard's a train station, so that's why
Oh,
sometimes
nice.
it's a little.
So at least you can get anywhere you want to go, right?
Oh, of course, and I live 15 minutes outside. So I went to school in the Bronx, but I'm not from there originally, and it was a 15-minute train ride back and forth. It was so easy. I felt so independent at 15 years old as a freshman in high school.
Oh,
Um,
I bet.
um, but to go just a little further on to this point, though, too, just about establishing, okay, well, look, the more that you build a rapport with these players and you have these shared experiences, I gotta imagine that that's been a huge part of why 16 of them have wanted to come back. It's not, I mean, of course, Loudoun United wants 16 of them, but those 16 players have to agree to come back and want to come back to be a part of this environment. And I gotta imagine that this relationship that you forged with them, among many other things about how inclusive and welcoming that the club is, has been a part of why you could make a starting lineup right now and not have a problem.
Oh, 100%. I think it's the environment you create. I think it's gotta feel inclusive, and it's got to be inclusive. Environments aren't just right, words on a wall. It's really how you interact daily and what you do, and that's where it's so important for me. I can't stand in the front of the room and not be honest if that's one of the values of the team and what we
Yeah.
preach, and it goes a long way to creating an environment. So when guests come in, my hope is they feel the environment, which I think is something that college it's harder to do in the professional level. It's so much easier to do in the college level when you're creating the environment and the culture of what you're doing, because the pro level, there's so many other things involved, money, ego, that are just a little bit different than, what are everybody's real goals. I think I've been in some situations where players' goals weren't aligned with the club's goals of winning. And when you find that out, it's very difficult. But yeah, it's a two-way street, and we want guys that want to be here, and we say staff, players, whoever it is, it's just as important to, it's a revolving door. If you don't want to be here, it's easy to get out as it is to get in. But once you're in, we want you to stay in because that's where you want to be.
Right. And so now going back, I want to ask a thing just about looking back on the Wake Forest experience though too. Like with is that I imagine that it's easier to be able to root out those kinds of problems and have those kinds of open discussions with the professional game. And to a degree, it's also very similar with Wake Forest, but with the transfer portal at least being as huge as it is now, I mean, I'm guilty of it sometimes with all the people that reach out to us and we just put it up on our thing saying, "Hey, look, coaches, players, everyone, this is who's out here." But with when you were back with Wake Forest, was there a different way that you had to go about solving problems with these younger guys, 18, 19, 20 years old, as opposed to some of the professionals? Though they're not much older, there still is that life experience of being able to learn and think through problems. So when sometimes these kinds of conflicts come up, maybe it's for the first time with these college kids, how would you go about that if you were in those discussions?
Yeah, it was different. You normally would take them for a coffee or go for a walk because you're on campus and it's easier to
Right.
get out, and you want to get them away from the office because and when you're in college, and I'm guilty of this too, and I look back at problems I had in college, they're really minimal in the grand scheme of life, of different things I've been through, deaths. I've lost a sister and different things where I didn't lose it in college. And, you think of breakups, the end of the world in college, or you think homesickness. And these are real problems that people are going through. They're just on a different scale. So I think it's important to, be empathetic and to, give honest advice of I've been through this situation. This is advice I'd suggest to you. Here's how you can deal with it and still perform and focus on soccer, but still kind of, have empathy for what the problem is and help them through it. And you have to have a little bit more patience as a college coach, I think, because the season's so short, and if something's going on and something's wrong, it can last a little bit longer as a younger player. And I also think it's just so much more important to have conversations in college on a more regular basis, because it happens fast. You could, fail a test, or you could do this or that, or you could skip a class, and you could be nervous, sleep through a class and be nervous that you're going to miss a game or miss a week, and then you're paranoid, and then it spirals. And it's important to put things in context, show empathy, and have conversations with college kids.
Oh, fascinating. And it goes back to this experience because again, you have been in those shoes before. You've been in that idea of the student athlete and continuing on with the successes that you've been able to have throughout your, I was gonna say your college career, but your career, your professional career moving forward. And you know, I one other thing I want to ask, and this is something that you mentioned, and it's the continuation of continuing to be, excuse me, it's the continuation of being better moving forward. And it's getting these different licenses, getting these different classes. I sometimes I would think, well, look, if you go through however many of these experiences, you could continue to take from those. And, why put, this isn't my personal view, but why put so many other classes and certifications, on your plate when you've already got so much going on? What would you say to people who maybe question some of those decisions, if there ever really are those that you've had a conversation with?
Um, my conversation would always again go around how good do you want to be at what you do?
Okay.
Because right now you're here and everybody has room to grow. So if I want to become a better coach and whatever it might be, however I think I need to become a better coach after I reflect, there's always a step you can take and there's always a need to grow. And it's what's the old quote, once you stop growing, you die, you start dying. It's like
Mhm.
it's the truth. It's like if you're not getting better today, someone else is. If someone else isn't trying to think outside the box, someone else is. And again, when I look back in 5 months from now, I hope I'm a significantly better coach and person than I am than I am now. And I think as players, it's the same way. If you're content, and I've told this to a number of players in the USL, like who are very talented players that I've had in my rosters. It's like, okay, you've got the MLS ability. You're incredibly technical. You're good at this or that. You have elite stuff here, but do you really want to get there? And the first response is always, yeah, I really want to get there. Then the second question is always, well, what are you willing to do to get there? And it's the answer is never running 10 miles a day in training or whatever. It's always in your control of what you can do outside of the game, observing, watching training footage, watching game footage, reading a book, learning from other people and what they do, learning from top players who play in your same position, watching Champions League games, not as a fan, but watching them as, okay, well, here's how they react after a bad call. Here's how they react after a goal. Do they stand up and go again, or do they pout? What are the consistency? How many touches do they have? And these are things that you can do on your own without the help of a coach. And it's the same thing as a coach. When you watch a game, how are you watching it? When you're reading a book, what are you trying to take out of it? And then more importantly, when you get what you want out of it, how do you incorporate it into your program or your process? And I think that's some of the more important things in my experience.
Coach, I think that's a great way to really just wrap up. I'll ask one final thing and then I'll leave the floor open to you again. Thank you so much for your time of wanting to come on. But, with this long, well, not so long off season at least. I mean, we've got December until, beginning of March when I get to turn on the TV or ESPN and watch Loudoun United and their opening match. And I think the schedule's just released today actually too, which is interesting, but
Oh
um
yeah.
of the timing.
So
But
at Birmingham, that'll be our first game you can watch.
oh, perfect then. All right, nice. So
Yeah.
I'll mark it then. I'm gonna write it down. I'm put it in whatever. Okay, nice. But asking this final question broadly, and then just moving forward from there. But what do you think we can expect from this new or not so new Loudoun United team, and just being able to see, what we can be after this conversation? What can we be watching moving forward from Loudoun?
I think you're going to see an evolution of where we were last year to next year. I think when you're able to bring players back from one year to the next, what you're trying to do is build layers into what you've already accomplished. So we were one of the best building teams in the league last year. We want to continue to refine that. People are going to try to come up with solutions to stop it. We're going to have to come up with solutions to again get on the front foot of that. We want to be better in the attacking third. We felt like when teams sat deeper against us, we had trouble breaking down a lower block. So for us, it's going to be how do we unlock the lower block and how do we set ourselves up to deny counterattacks. And these are things that we want to continue to build in. We're going to double down on, the way I lead is a player-led environment. So I'm going to double down on these players and give them, ownership of what we're doing within the context of the environment and culture. So for us, I think it's going to be a fun team, an exciting team, and a team that's I think we'll take some of the lessons we learned this year and be better for them in 2025.
Well, perfect then, Coach. I really appreciate the time. I'll be making sure to watch you. Look forward to the Birmingham match, and I appreciate you telling me though too. I tried to look, but I rushing and that's my fault. I should have known that to be
No,
honest with you, but
all good. I didn't know they were coming out until this morning anyway, so that's no issue at all. But no, I appreciate you having me on and all you do for the game. And if I can do anything else in the future, please let me know.
I appreciate it, Coach. Maybe we pick up an interview at the end of the season. But we'll see.
Let's do it. Awesome, Daniel. Appreciate it, man.
Coach, appreciate you as well. All the best to you and happy
Have a
holidays.
good one.